What's the scariest thing you've woken up to in the middle of the night? My ceiling fan pulling off my ceiling and hanging a few inches from my face. My daughter had a ring around the Rosie doll when she was little. You put the doll's hands together and it would sing the song. Anyway, she left it out outside one night apparently and the dew in the grass shorted it out. I woke up in the middle of the night to this faint ring around the Rosie song playing over and over. It was creepy and we didn't have an outdoor light in the backyard, so I had to go by myself with a flashlight and search the yard for this creepy doll. Woke up to the feeling of something on my face. Tried to brush it off and in my half asleep state thought it was attacking me. Cue absolute freak out because something is crawling all over me and I can't get it off. Just for me to find out it was my own hand that had gone numb while I was asleep. We have a window AC unit basically right above our bed. One night, ice must have gotten built up inside, and it fell onto the fan that blows the air out. I remember hearing a loud bang and then being sprayed in the face by liquid. My first thought was that someone broke in and shot my wife and I got covered in blood. Ducking terrifying. Edit. The liquid was cold, and that should have been an instant giveaway that it wasn't blood, but I was in such a panic and confused from just being woken up that the temperature didn't register right away. I had stumbled downstairs to get some water from the tap at about 2 AM. I look out of the window directly in front of me and stare into pitch darkness. You can't see anything more than a few feet. Turn the tap off. Look up and there's a dude's face just staring back at me. He's so close he's practically got his nose to the glass. A face that makes Gollum look like a model. This guy is obviously a serial killer. At least that's what my sleep-addled mind was thinking. I hit myself and just keep staring. He's also hitting himself and keeps staring. Until he starts pointing. He's pointing at the outside tap. He's pointing at the outside tap because he's a homeless dude who is getting water for himself and his friends who have started living in the woods nearby. He smiles at me, this black-toothed grin, so I smile back and nod. He fills his water bottles and buggers off back to the woods. Over the next few months I got to know them all and they were super nice. They'd come for water and I'd leave them little care packages of food until they moved on to somewhere else. Presumably to scare the it out of someone else in the middle of the night. TLDR. Went to get water. A madman's face appears at the window out of the darkness. Turns out he's a homeless guy after water and not a murderer. So starts a beautiful, but brief, relationship. Edit. Obligatory holy it that blew up and thanks for the gold kind stranger. Open up. Police. We have a search warrant. It was about 6 AM. Accompanied by banging that was loud as it. Turns out it was for the apartment beneath my bedroom window, but I sat straight up and my first thought was, oh no, they got me, despite being one of the least shady people alive. Daughter had this Minnie Mouse baby doll that crawled on all fours when you touched a button on its back. Wife and I woke up at 2 AM to the sound of the doll's creepy laugh. Went out to the living room and the doll was walking straight into the corner. Each time it stopped it would just start right over again. The button wasn't broken or anything, so I'm not sure what happened. Donated it. Someone slamming on the door of the apartment across the hall screaming your apartment is on fire. It sounded like it was on mine. Woke up and immediately started choking on smoke. The fire alarm then went off. Everything ended up being okay. Someone flicked a cigarette butt off their balcony. It landed on the one a few floors beneath it and set their patio furniture on fire. Hence why someone saw it before the alarm went off. It was just so disorienting and terrifying to wake up to the pounding on the door, the screaming, and the smoke. We had a rooster who was pretty aggressive, but he watched the rest of the chickens. He was so aggressive though that only certain people could go near him, otherwise he'd attack and spur. For a while he had free reign of our yard, but we had to pin him because he'd attack people. Well, he'd figured out he could sort of halfway fly out and get back into our yard after we'd all gone to sleep. One night we woke up to what sounded like a young girl screaming at the top of their lungs. We ran outside to see what it was and old Bark, his name, was walking around decapitated. He'd picked a fight with a raccoon and lost, but that sound he made that night still haunts my dreams sometimes. I woke up to my mom panicking and locking my door and asking me to call the cops. It was around 3 AM and someone was trying to choke her and possibly do worse. She said that she heard someone open her bedroom door and lay on the corner of the bed. She called my name out multiple names thinking it was me, but then someone tried choking her and cutting her with something. She managed to kick them off and ran downstairs into my room to protect me. Once the police came, they did a search outside our home and found nothing. They asked if anyone else lived with us. We said the only other person that lived with us was a man who rented the downstairs basement, but he was never a problematic person. This man went to church every Sunday and kept to himself. Honestly, he was barely there half the time because he was always working. They decided to speak with him anyways and they found him in his room masturbating to porn and bleeding heavily because he had accidentally cut himself when my mom kicked him off. Yeah, that it was scary. After that event, I had horrible sleep paralysis for several nights. I kept dreaming that a black shadow would crawl into bed right next to me and strangle me. So I've had a lot of comments say that I'm lying about this event, but I have no reason to lie. This was really traumatizing for both my mom and I. My mom didn't want to press charges because she was fighting for my sister's custody and didn't want the judge to see my home as an unfit place to be because of the event. My mom was also not legal at the time, so I'm guessing part of her was also scared she could be deported or something. Why did the cops let him go? I couldn't tell you. I'm not a cop. I don't know how those things work. Although they came and helped us. Many cops in my town are very rude people. My mom had previously tried calling the cops when her ex, my sister's dad, gave her a black eye and they did nothing about it. My mom has had a rough life and a lot of unjust things have happened to her. It actually makes me want to cry when I read comments saying that I'm lying because my mom almost got raped and possibly killed, and people think I made up a very detailed story for some damn upvotes. Grow up. My mom is amazing, and I'm so thankful that her first thought was to run down to my room and protect me. The unmistakable sound of a pet getting ready to vomit on the floor. Terrifying. Housemate coming home drunk after midnight from a Halloween party dressed as Jason from Friday 13th. Walked into my room by mistake in his full Voorhees costume and just stood in the middle of the room looking around trying to work out where he was. Woke me up as my door opened and I was frozen terrified for a good 30 seconds. Bought a lock for my door the following week. I lived W. My oldest sister and her 2 daughters. Her youngest, 3 years old, was a sleepwalker. She was tiny, white blonde and liked to wear a white nightgown that was too big for her. Yeah. Wake up to the sound of thumb sucking right next to my head. Roll over and see the world's shortest ghost. I'm sure there were worse things, but one time when I was a kid, my parents placed a full body shaped Elmo balloon in my room while I was sleeping. Ever woken up to a floating body? When I was young-ish, I woke up to the sound of people quietly moving around downstairs when I believed I was home alone. Hitting myself and still confused from the sleep, I grabbed a telescopic wheel brace as the only available weapon. Heart beating out my chest. Fight or flight reflex in full effect when I heard the sound of footsteps up the stairs outside my room. Hand on the door handle and ready to fight for my life. I hear my dad's voice. Immediately realize my parents had got back from holiday earlier than I expected. The endorphin rush was intense. 8-year-old son at the foot of my bed, vomiting blood. Edit. RIP my inbox lol. Here's a recent picture of him. His name is Cooper. He's an AKC registered Maltese that is scared of his own shadow. But my mom adores him. He likes to try to play with his younger sisters. An adopted lab boxer mix and an adopted corgi mix. Then he remembers how tiny he is and ends up barking while the other 2 play. Edit 2. Abby the lab mix. Vet says boxer. Adoption center said some type of shepherd. And Piper the corgi King Charles Spaniel mix. Also, Marmalade the cat and her biggest catch to date. My dad put a bell on her but it obviously didn't work. The bird is alive. We released it after gently taking it from her. It wasn't the middle of the night. But seeing as I had just stayed up until 7 AM. Anyways, I had just fallen asleep and no more than 30 minutes later was woken by my mother crying profusely and wailing. He fell and hurt himself. He can't move his legs. Dad and little brother were home. I snapped awake and went to see what happened. My mom was crying in the bathroom while trying to wash her dog. My sister and I had rushed in at 7:30 AM thinking our dad or brother was paralyzed. It was the dog. He slid on some ice outside, fell off the stairs, and landed on the concrete weird and pinched a nerve or broke his back. The vet looked him over and fixed his back pretty quick. Had to give him antibiotics because he hit himself after being momentarily paralyzed and it got into the wound. But a few weeks later he was back to being himself. Back in my couch surfing days, I spent the night at a ranch in Enumclaw and woke up to a Great Dane humping my face. I used to live a few minutes away from Buncefield Oil Storage Facility. It was the 5th largest oil depot in the UK. On the morning of the 11th of December 2005 it exploded. The explosion threw me out of my bed, and the doors of our house burst open. I looked outside my bedroom window and the sky was engulfed by a giant fireball. 11-year-old me genuinely thought it was the end of the world. It still baffles me as to how no one died during that incident. My cat giving birth on the corner of my bed. Apparently 100 other people have had this happen. Who knew having cats as pets was so common? My dinkus neighbor was drunk and thought my apartment was his. He broke the lock on my door. He then opened up the door to my bedroom and scared the crap out of me at 1 AM. I screamed and he apologized profusely and asked if I wanted to drink Modelo with him and his wife at their house. There had been a baptism so everyone was partying it up across the way. I went because they're nice. And they had tamales. Edit. Holy cow, this got really popular. I'm female. So I was terrified for a ton of different reasons. My neighbors are from Guatemala. So these were the kind with banana leaves. The broken lock was worth the tamales, yes. We're still on good terms. My neighbors are harmless unless you're a lock. Or a tamale. The loud sound of breaking glass from downstairs. Husband armed himself and crept downstairs. No intruder. One of the cats knocked over a centerpiece that exploded all over the floor. Exploding head syndrome, alternately termed episodic cranial sensory shock, is a benign condition in which a person experiences unreal noises that are loud and short, like a bomb exploding or a gunshot, when falling asleep or waking up. These noises are often jarring and frightening for the person. Neither the cause nor the mechanism is known, though harmless in and of themselves. Episodes have been known to create distress or impairment in the lives of individuals. It happens to me once or twice a year. It keeps things interesting. The clear and obvious sounds of an animal in the bedroom. We had no pets. I'm in the UK, so my sleepy brain at first thought it was a rat, or several rats fighting for their lives. After some minor panicking, it turned out to be a pigeon trapped behind the boarded up fireplace. Slept on the sofa that night. Fairly strong earthquake and kidney stone. Not on same night, thankfully. I had a Siamese mixed cat and one summer it started to sing in the middle of the night. Sounded like a crying baby right in my condo. Freaked me the hell out the first time I heard it. In college, I woke up to my glass closet doors violently shaking in my apartment. I 100% thought someone was in the closet. My roommate was working a night shift on campus and wasn't there, so I was alone. I basically sat in silent terror for an hour until I got enough courage to get up and go check. Nothing was there, and I convinced myself that I had a weird nightmare. That morning, I got up and was reading the news and saw that there was an earthquake. I realized that is what I heard and it made much more sense. I went to college on the East Coast to the US, so it was really strange to have an earthquake. Edit. It was this earthquake. Sleep paralysis. Absolutely terrifying the first time : I woke up to a bright orange window thinking it was just something strange or that I was just dreaming. Went back to sleep. Woke up again some time later in realization and ran to tell my mother. The neighbor's shed was on fire and our fence and cherry tree were catching fire as well. Still remember standing in the middle of the night looking at the fire and all the ash falling. The neighbor's got a cool looking rebuilt shed now. I got up to go to the bathroom and didn't turn my bedroom light on, so I didn't see that anything was amiss. When I got to the toilet, I suddenly realized that my hands were covered in blood up to my elbows. It wasn't dripping wet, but it wasn't dry either. I didn't have any cuts or seem to have any injury of any kind. When I washed my hands I checked everywhere. No injury. What the hell was happening? When I went back to my bedroom I turned the light on, and half of my pillow was covered in blood as well. Almost exactly down the middle. It was then that I realized I'd gotten a nosebleed and been wiping at it in my sleep. And it must have stopped just before I woke up, so I didn't have any clue left on my body as to where I'd bled from. I was living in a very dry area at the time, so nosebleeds were a common issue for me. That's the only time I've gotten one during my sleep though. Someone standing in the bedroom doorway. He flipped on the light then flipped it off. I woke my husband up and this guy walked out of the apartment. My husband ran out after him in his underwear. I went to the kitchen and got a knife and ran after my husband. Turns out, the woman who lived there before us had broken up with her boyfriend and moved without telling him or getting back his key. I guess he came back to see her at 3 in the morning. My laptop screen lighting up. It would be normal except I closed my laptop before heading to bed. An earthquake. But you see, I'm no California dweller who would half expect to die in the night on any given evening thanks to unforgiving geological processes. No, I'm in England, and an earthquake was a novel experience for me. I thought a train was approaching my house and even awoke, braced for impact. I was utterly terrified afterwards, as I'd taken the ground's solidity and reliability for granted. My heart racing so fast, I couldn't breathe. I was in the middle of a supraventricular tachycardia episode. My BPM was 210. Had to go to the ER and get drugs to slow it down. I was absolutely terrified I was going to have a heart attack that night. Scary stuff. About a year ago I was woken up at 4:30 AM by someone walking into my apartment. I live alone. Oddly, after the first split second WTF startle, I wasn't at all scared. I guess I just sensed there was no danger. Turned out to be the wasted hookup of the guy in the apartment downstairs from me. She had taken his keys to go out for a smoke, then forgotten what floor he lived on. And my cheap landlord had reused a matching set of front and back door locks on 2 separate apartments, so they had the same key. She was so disoriented and way more freaked out than I was. I ended up escorting her to the right apartment, and then she asked me for a hug. I have a new lock now. Then there was the time I woke up to the sound and shockwaves of a bomb blast destroying a nearby abortion clinic. But that's a different story. Edit. The thread is dead. But if anyone checks back and wants to know the second story, it happened in Toronto in the early 90s. Some American so-called pro-life it-ball set a bomb and blew up the more gentler abortion clinic. Real professional job. It was located in half of a duplex, and they managed to destroy only that half of the building, while leaving the other, residential side more or less intact. I lived nearby and woke up when my bed shifted under me. I thought it was an earthquake until I heard the sirens. I woke up to sound of scampering raccoon-like creature inside my room zooming about the night before Christmas. It then bounced on my bed, jumped off and ran out, raccoon-sized. I followed it and it was laying on the couch and barked at me adorably. Apparently my parents got my sister a puppy and it had escaped during the night because it was lonely. They had it in an uncovered puppy kennel in the living room and he climbed out. The interesting thing is he didn't like my older sister and instead clung to me, and he became my dog when she moved out and couldn't take him. Best friend to this day. In college, I woke up one night to an absolutely blood-curdling scream and what sounded like someone ripping a piece of thick fabric outside my window. Not right outside it, but like 10-20 feet away. 2 of my 3 roommates at the time also heard it and we all ended up in the kitchen talking about it for a bit before calling 911 to report it and then going back to bed. I couldn't, so I watched Fear and Loathing first and then eventually passed out once the sun came out. Walking to class the next day there was police tape in my neighbor's yard. We were on the corner, and this was the house behind us. Turns out the noise we heard was someone being duck-eyed murdered. The most ducked up part? About a year later, we all learned that the killer was a cop. This is the short version of a much longer story, and I encourage anyone interested to read more about it. Here's an article that summarizes the aftermath from the time. P.S. There's supposedly a pretty good snapped episode about this murder, but I've never been able to bring myself to watch it. The whole thing still creeps me out too much. The chick from The Grudge standing at the foot of my bed. Took me about 3 seconds of intense fear before I could move and get to the light. I freaked my partner out because I half fell and weirdly scream moaned on my way to the light switch. The amount of relief I felt once I was able to see was immeasurable. I had thrown my black pea coat over my vacuum. This happened around 3 AM and needless to say I didn't go back to sleep. I had so much adrenaline I cleaned my kitchen and meal prepped for the week. So that was nice lol. Sleeping at home. Alone. I woke up one night when I rolled over and someone else's limp arm flopped across my chest. I freaked out, grabbed the arm, flung it away, and tried to scramble out of bed before realizing that it was my own arm. It had completely lost all feeling up to the shoulder. The sound of someone coming in through the back door of my place at 3 AM. A mortar alarm while sleeping in a tent in Afghanistan. You have about 30 seconds to get out of bed, get fully dressed, get all your gear and weapon and get the duck outside. Pretty itty, especially when you had been up for over 24 hours straight and you get an hour of sleep before being violently woken up. My ducking friend standing over me in the middle of the night while sleeping at his place. Methodicus scared the life out of me. Just eerie feeling whenever I am alone at home, like something's not right. That's why I turn on the TV, radio, and play YouTube music in the background. Went to bed at midnight, woke up in searing pain at 2 AM. Such grave pain that I thought my appendix had burst. Flipped on the lights to take a Tylenol only to find I had rolled over on a black widow spider that had bit me. In late, but well. One night I swore I heard a man's voice downstairs. I slowly crept downstairs, found nothing, and went to bed. Next night, again, I swore I heard a man's voice downstairs. Again I crept downstairs and again found nothing. Third night, this time I heard a woman's voice downstairs. Again nothing. Fourth night was a Saturday and I was up super late, and thus was downstairs when I heard my laptop say your virus definitions have been updated. Apparently I'd gotten the Avast update that enabled voice reporting by default and randomized between a male and female voice. Turned that it off right quick. Freshman year in college, the room next to me had some serious sexual Olympics going on. Said Olympics were interrupted by an angry boyfriend kicking the door in. He proceeded to beat the it out of both of them. Her screams were something I will never forget. You would think I would have gone and tried to stop him from attacking them, but I just froze and listened. Our cat got stuck in the handle of a bag that contained a glass container. She got scared and came barreling into our room in the middle of the night with the glass clanging everywhere. My first vision was a person sprinting at me with a knife, obviously still dreaming. One night when I was sleeping over at my friend's house, his younger sister, who was apparently a sleepwalker, came into his room in the middle of the night dead asleep, and sat down cross-legged at the end of his bed, and with a cup that they had next to the sink in the hallway bathroom that she had somehow grabbed on the way in there, started putting it on and taking off the end of one of her bare feet like she was trying on shoes, all while half singing half humming the Gem and the Holograms theme song. To someone like me who had never witnessed such behavior before, it was a jarring and confusing sight to wake up to. It was more than my 13-year-old brain could process. But my friend just laughed it off and explained that she sometimes would sleepwalk and sing since she was younger, and it was something he had just gotten used to. Despite my friend's attitude about it all, I can say I wasn't overly eager to sleep over there again. A home invasion. As I'm laying sound asleep in my bed, I wake to having a bright light source shining on my face. I open my eyes and see two sets of legs feet standing directly next to my bed. My first thought upon waking is that it is the police. I very quickly realize though that these are not cops, but burglars. Amazingly, I don't at all cower, but instead feel an intense surge of anger. I immediately jump up out of bed and begin to scream at the top of my lungs. Get the duck out of my apartment. I continue to scream this like a chant. The burglars immediately do a turnabout and book it out of my apartment with me in chase. When I chase them out my patio door, I stop. As I'm only wearing underwear, I find that all of my electronic components are unplugged and ready to be stolen. However, everything is in place except for my CDs, which are gone. The police were very good about how they responded. They sent a CSI person to take prints of my apartment, and the detective responsible for my case even phoned me 2 days later to say that no matches to prints were found. I wasn't surprised. I think they were just a couple of brazen teenagers. I told the cop, how stupid can you be to shine a flashlight into someone's face and not expect them to wake up? He told me, well, criminals aren't exactly known for having high intelligence, which is one of the reasons they are criminals. Good point. Anyway, only after these two idiots were out of my apartment did it occur to me that they could have been armed and could have panicked and shot me. It was only at that point that I felt the anxiety of fear. Heard a sound like low thunder or a big truck coming down the street. Next thing I know, whole house starts shaking. 4 point something earthquake. Not your average occurrence for St. Louis, MO. My 5-year-old staring at me. Probably the time where a cougar killed a deer in my side yard. The noise. Oof. Also when I died. 3 distinct footsteps and a sigh. Wouldn't be that scary except I live alone.